On today's episode of She Made It, you get to eavesdrop on a conversation with a world-class prima ballerina and how faith was an integral part of her journey. Have you ever felt deep within that there's something more you're supposed to be doing, but you're not sure what? Have you ever felt like you're producing a lot, but not expressing at all? Welcome to She Made It. I'm your host, Elle Zimmerman, and I am on a mission to help you cultivate meaning through the path of creativity. Join me to eavesdrop on conversations with brave women who broke through their resistances into a life of authenticity. Because I believe if she made it, you can too.
So today, I, Clara, Elle's co-host, get to introduce our guest. Her name is Abby Morwood, and I actually got to meet Abby when I was in high school. And I remember being totally starstruck because I had seen her on billboards for the Cincinnati Ballet, and I had seen her as the Sugar Plum Fairy and the Nutcracker. And as a 14-year-old or something, also taking dance classes at the time, I was in awe of her. And I really thought she could be a great guest for She Made It because she had this incredible creative journey as a ballet dancer. But then, like Elle said earlier, she made a huge transition to be a full-time mom. And I actually got to be here in our studio for her live interview, which was really fun for me. And what really stood out is how her faith was so instrumental in leading her through her journey of ballet and also helping her to gracefully transition and to peacefully transition in those huge life changes from dancer to full-time mom.
The other thing that is so unique about Abby is that as a ballerina, your career starts so young. So she was barely even a teenager and started working professionally. So that's kind of different for our listeners and the different guests that we've had. But thank you for bringing up her faith, because the goal of She Made It is to showcase all different journeys, all different life stages, creative directions. And a common theme that I do find is that spirituality tends to be a part of that journey. And I just love how Abby was so real and so authentic in sharing her own faith. Welcome to this episode of She Made It. And today is another one of those special days, special episodes where I get to welcome a guest right into the studio to do an interview, a conversation, so we can learn a little bit about her creative path. So I'm so happy to welcome our guest, Abby Morwood.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, welcome. And there's so much that I want to share about your story, and I've taken a peek online to look at, a little bit of the history of your journey, and I'm going to let the listeners kind of take their own look at the beautiful photographs of you, because you are a ballerina. And we all as little girls dream of being a ballerina. And I would love to just start our conversation today with, a lot of us dream about being ballerinas, and we might be in the dance recital. I call them the Dolly Dinkle School of Dance, where you don't really learn how to dance. You just get a outfit and a recital.
Right.
But the true art of ballet is a whole different path and discipline. And so maybe just start us off today telling us what inspired you to take that path in your life.
I definitely agree with you. It's every little girl's dream. And I started out in a Dolly Dinkle type of school. Somehow it worked. I started out, I was really late. So I started when I was 10, and I had missed so much training because I didn't start like most people at 3 years old. But it was good that I was 10 because I latched on really quickly and I was able to immediately pick it up, started to get really good roles. And at 15, I was asked to join the company that was a part of this ballet school that I was attending. And I started work full time.
Wow.
And I loved it because, and you think 15, that's so young, you're still a baby. But I had this full-time job all of a sudden. I had to pull out of high school. I would homeschool at night after I've worked a full 8-hour day. And it really became my heart. The ballet world became my home. And actually, one of the things that I love the most about it, Eric Little's quote, when I run, I feel God's pleasure, or something like that.
Yeah.
When I danced, I felt God's pleasure. It was very, very beautiful, the feeling that I had. And I knew that he had gifted me with the gift of ballet beyond just a little girl's love of it. I had actually a natural inclination for it.
Yeah.
So it was very, very easy for me. And I didn't have good training. And so it was really incredible that I was able to go a professional route. And I had a lot of struggles because I didn't have good training, where I had to catch up and
That's
train
fascinating.
myself.
Yeah. So even when you were in the company, you would say your training wasn't great?
That helped. In fact, the new director that came in and hired me, he kind of took me under his wing, so to speak, and gave me some training that I didn't have. And it was brutal.
Yeah.
Because I had created a lot of bad habits that I had to get rid of. And I was so young, my body was still developing, and it was very, very tough. So I was thankful for him to give me that. But when I left the company after 2 years of being with them to join Cincinnati Ballet's company, I really realized how behind I was. So he had given me a foundation, but man, to not have that really good training in school. So many people who are professional dancers, they leave home at a very young age, let's say 5 years old, or maybe even with their parents, of course, they move to go to a really good ballet school to get training until they are at the professional level. We couldn't afford that.
Crazy.
It's nuts. And there are kids who are 13 going to boarding school just so that they can dance.
Yeah, so my daughter, because I always dreamed of being a ballerina.
Yes.
I did get the role in Chorus Line of the one that says, at the ballet.
Yes.
So I got to sing about
So
being at the
good.
ballet, but I didn't actually dance in the ballet.
Okay.
But so I, of course, when I had a daughter and she was interested in dance, I didn't push her, but I did choose a very good dance school for her.
Excellent.
Well, it actually kind of backfired a little bit because it was so intense, and she
It burns
was.
them out.
Yeah, it was. It took the joy out of it for her.
Yes.
And so in some ways, I think there was a gift that you didn't start.
I'm
until
so glad
10.
you said that.
Yeah,
Because truly, I was able to hold on to that passion because I wasn't burned out.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of my girlfriends who went through that kind of intensity despised it, learned to despise the ballet, whereas me, it was always a love. Always a love. And the ballet world ended up, I always wanted to be a missionary.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I would be a missionary overseas. That was kind of my dream as a little girl, besides being a dancer. Well, then I got into the ballet world and I realized this is a mission field. And so I got to become a missionary in the mission field, and I was doing Bible studies and stuff like that. So it was really neat to be able to see God to take my heart to be a missionary and give me that field at such a young age.
And so when you moved from Alabama to Cincinnati, and you left your family behind,
Right.
How? Because I think a theme kind of that shows up in your life as we're going to continue talking is transitions.
Yes,
So that transition from the home of your parents to now being in a city,
Exactly.
what was that like?
It was surprisingly smooth. And here's why, because I found a church right away. I was able to find a couple that took me in to their home. Mm-hmm. So I walked into community right away. Mm-hmm. And that transition, that was difficult. And like I was saying when we were chatting before, I did struggle with anxiety and anxiety attacks.
Well, the ballet world is intense.
So intense.
Yeah.
I think if you're not struggling from anxiety attacks, there might be something wrong with you. Kind of a sad thing to admit, but it's true. But because I had this, I walked into another family and they treated me like their daughter, and they loved me and supported me and became some of the ballet's greatest supporters.
Yeah.
And not only physically did they support me, but emotionally and spiritually. And so I was once again thrown into protection. Mm-hmm. And I'm really thankful for that, because it would have been a lot harder being so young and naive, like any 17-year-old is.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy that it starts, that career starts that
so
young.
So young.
And so I want to talk about some of the roles, but because we're talking about sort of like the career of a ballerina, what is, like, if you started 15, you're in a company and out of, not living with your parents anymore at 17. Right. And what is like old in ballet?
Oh gosh, so young.
Yeah. What?
So old would be mid-30s.
Okay.
For a female.
Yeah.
Actually, let me rephrase that. For a male, mid-30s is kind of getting there.
Yeah.
Young 30s is old for a female.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous. And I think that's changing because people are realizing that actually, when you're in your 30s as a woman, you're really 30s and 40s are prime decades for the female body. And even though you're beaten up in the ballet world, still your body is strong and capable. And so you see a lot of women having babies and then going back now to the dance field. Oh,
that's encouraging.
Because they can, right?
Yeah.
Because, wow, our bodies really can handle so much more than we think. But it is brutal and you have to take extra care. And as you know, when you have a baby, your body is never the same, which is wonderful, but it's never the same.
Right. Yeah.
So you learn to work with your body differently, which is interesting.
So while dancing with Cincinnati Ballet, just kind of list off a couple of your favorite roles that you danced.
One of my all-time favorites was Marguerite. And she was, what is the novel? It's an Alex Dumas Jr. novel. I'm trying to remember the name. I'll have to... I can't remember. Lady of the Camellias.
Oh, okay.
Lady of the Camellias.
Okay.
I had Marguerite in my head because that's the main character. She was my all-time favorite role.
Yeah.
Because of the depth of her character. She was very sad but spirited. I mean, she just had every emotion. And it was one of my greatest breakout roles where they still to this day remember that role. And so it was one of the highlights of my career. Another one would be Wendy and Peter Pan, or even Cinderella and Cinderella. That was really fun. So really great breakout roles for me that I just felt like I became these women.
Yeah.
And that was such a high, isn't it? When you're in a role and you feel like you are that person.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to hear you speak about that as a dancer.
Unfortunately, so many dancers do not.
Yeah. Oh.
Acting is half the battle.
Yeah.
And yet you get stone face.
Yeah.
With so many dancers. But how is the audience you don't talk.
Right.
So you have to make it interesting somehow besides the steps.
Right.
That was always my greatest passion, was acting.
Oh, that's funny. And mine was dancing.
How funny. If God just meshed us together.
That's awesome.
Our paths together.
Well, but that's why a role like Marguerite stands out, because you bring that full depth to it, too.
And I read the novel, which was a really wonderful novel, to prepare myself before I even got the role.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Because I was so determined to do this role, and I just fell in love with the character. It's a very sad story if you ever read it. But it's good.
Yeah. So what was your least favorite role?
Ooh, I have so many.
You're like, I have to do this again?
Oh, yes. Well, unfortunately, part of the least favorite roles were because I was doing principal roles, and I got it felt like a demotion where I had to do a lesser role sometimes. And so that's just my pride. Let's just be real. So some of my least favorite roles were because I was just doing a short little pas de deux and maybe it was 2 minutes long within Capellia was an example. I loved my partner, so he made it fun for me, and that was great. But yeah, I definitely have a lot of those.
So you, over the last couple years, made a really big decision.
Yes. To
pivot.
Yes.
In a very different direction.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and it's for a ballerina, life-changing.
Absolutely.
And so will you share a little bit with us what that is?
Yes. In my 10th season as a professional dancer, I got pregnant, and we were actually hoping, my husband and I were hoping to be pregnant. It took us a little bit longer than we thought, and we finally got pregnant. We were so excited. This was towards the beginning of the season. And so I danced through probably 3 productions pregnant.
Wow.
It was really tough. In fact, my last show, I was 15 weeks pregnant, and I was doing this really big pas de deux, a dance for 2. And oh my goodness, I was just getting slung around. I just thought, thank you, Lord, that the baby is so protected in there, because I was having a hard time sucking in my stomach and bending backwards.
Oh my goodness.
All this stuff.
And just your balance is off.
Oh, your balance is off. Your mind, everything's off, right? So it was nuts. But I had a really excellent partner who, it was my final show. And this is interesting. I did not think, I was telling people that I was coming back after this pregnancy. But at that show, I knew it was my last show, and I just wept over it. Of course, it's a grieving process that you have to go through when you make this decision. But I had not made the decision yet. It actually happened later on in the season when contracts came out. And there was a little bit of, I guess you could say, drama there. But God had showed me and made it very clear that I was to be a full-time mom. And I had always wanted to be a full-time mom my whole life. I mean, my greatest love truly was to be a mother. And ballet was just second to that, believe it or not. And I'm thankful that I got to enjoy that for so long.
We have a train going by, so pardon the train. We're talking about transition, so it's perfect as we're segueing from one part of our life to the next.
That's great.
Yeah.
But it ended up, I still, after I gave birth to my first son, I still was thinking I would go back to ballet. And I actually got a couple of job offers to be a principal in other companies, just out of the blue. And I really believe it was the Lord testing me. Going, are you going to continue on in this stay-at-home mom journey that I have placed you in, or are you going to be tempted? And I thought, this sounds pretty good. I only have one kid. And then 4 months postpartum, I got pregnant again.
Wow.
And we were ecstatic.
Yeah.
And it was so, I like to use the word shalom, because that is a peace that can only come from the Lord, the peace that surpasses all understanding. And we had that peace. And it was a really tough transition. And it was big in my postpartum. I felt that transition. But it was clear that that's what I was supposed to do. And I had great shalom in that time. And still to this day, I do not regret it.
That's beautiful.
Ever.
And I just want to reflect on, you talk about it's peaceful, but there was grieving.
Yes.
And that I always say that, because I talk with a lot of women about transitions, and even if we're moving to something we love or something we're meant to move toward, we have to let go of something. We have to say goodbye to something in order for change to happen. And it doesn't mean grieving is always a sad thing.
Right.
It's just a releasing.
Right. And that takes time.
Yeah.
Transition takes time. And it is often painful because there are trials and tribulations in those times, but you can have peace even in those tribulations, even in the sadness. And grieving is so healthy, isn't it? And especially when you're letting go of something that you've worked your whole life for. One of the hard things I battled with too when I got pregnant with my first child was, what about my ministry? And I had this talk with my husband so often about, I'm taking the ministry out of the ballet. Like it's all me, right? God is not powerful enough. Well, shame, for shame, because of course he doesn't need me there. But it was interesting that he started pulling out the ministry before this decision, before I became pregnant. And I just kind of was in denial about it. So the work had been done. He was effective there, right? We were effective there. It was beautiful, but it was time to move on. And I started seeing how he was showing me, okay, you're not needed here right now. My new ministry is to my children.
Is your children.
That is a full-time mission field.
Oh, believe me.
And I still have babies, so I can only imagine if they're a little bit older.
Yeah. Well, and also, I love how you acknowledged the ballet offers from the other companies as, a little test. And I don't know if I look at it as a test other than I might say that God really wanted you to be clear that it was your decision.
Exactly.
You had to wrestle with that.
Yes.
And so
I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. So it was very clear that I'm deciding.
Exactly.
It didn't happen to me. It's not, yeah. So that also brings the peace.
It does. You're so right.
Yeah.
To say, okay, I'm going to become a mother full time. I want to do that. I have the passion to do that. God has given me the ability to do it. Yeah. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to be swayed by a pretty sweet offer.
And how old are your children now?
Almost 2. So I have a 22-month and a 9-month.
Okay.
It's a lot.
You didn't see her face expression. It was mixed joy, mixed terror.
Yes, it's a lot. It has been wonderful, but it is tough having babies that close.
Yeah. So tell me so you've made this transition. You've had your grieving and maybe still have moments of grieving because it doesn't just.
That was only 2 years ago.
Yeah. And you're stepping into a totally different role, different schedule, different.
Oh, yes.
So what's been the best and the hardest part of it?
The hardest part, I think, is the fact that you all of a sudden are taking care of these little humans that have souls. And you feel the weight of that responsibility greater than anything you've ever had in your life. I thought it was difficult managing my own career, but now I have these little souls in my care, and wow, they're only babies, and I feel the weight of that. My postpartum was difficult. My pregnancies were very difficult. And so through my pregnancies and postpartum, God has given me a new ministry, and I am now ministering and reaching out to mothers in the perinatal phase. So anything pregnancy and postpartum related. And in fact, I'm about to give a talk at my church on June 8th about my postpartum struggles and prenatal struggles. And so I'm really
cool.
thankful to have been stepped out of the ballet ministry now into my home ministry, as well as using my home ministry to bless others.
Right.
And so I've been able to come alongside of a lot of young moms.
Yeah.
And
so you're such a perfect example for me, and I know for our listeners, of just trust. Just trust and
keep walking.
Yeah, and seeing the opportunity, like you said, your ego gets in the way of what's the ballet world going to do without me.
Yes.
But then acknowledging that you're one part of a really big universe, world. And it's just, I don't know, how do you describe the ability to see what the next thing is for you? I mean, motherhood's a little bit clear cut.
Sure.
But this now, how you're moving into another area of serving and ministering. And
I have had to really train myself to listen to the Lord and his plan, because I get ahead of myself. I'm like, I'm going to do this and do this and do this. And I think so often as women, we feel like we're holding the world with our two hands. And if we slip even just a little pinky away, the world's going to come crashing down. But really, it's not our hands that are holding it, it's God's. And so when I release that freedom, just live in the moment, keep walking forward. Like you said, it's a blind stepping forward, trusting in the Lord. He shows you so clearly what the path is. It's very clear.
And I appreciate that very much. But maybe you don't trust that. Or maybe you where does your own feelings about it, or your own wrestling, because we might feel the prompting, but how do we trust that?
I think accountability is huge in that. The people that you have surrounding you, whether it be your spouse or your family, because I have often come to them with all of my dreams and passions and things that I feel God is prompting me to do. And very often they'll tell me, let's take 1,000 steps backwards. You just gave birth.
Right.
This is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But so good accountability, I think. I don't know. I hope that answers your question. That has been very helpful for me.
Yeah. And just community. You've brought community up a lot. Huge. People, the families you lived with.
Yes. Without that.
Yeah.
Without people speaking into your life, we need to preach to ourselves truth all the time. But sometimes we can deceive ourselves to thinking that we're preaching truth to ourselves, but really we're telling ourselves what we want to hear.
Right.
And to have those outside influences that you trust are huge. And different mindsets, right? Different perspectives have been very helpful for me to go, okay, this really is a calling from the Lord, but I still need to hold back. That's been the warning here recently. But it's helpful for me to be able to move forward and have wise people in my life.
Well, and obviously, having been in the ballet world, you're used to being very disciplined, very structured.
It has helped shape me.
Yeah, and I think you are an artist.
Yes.
And in motherhood, because I gave my career, I put my career on the back burner to be a full-time mom. And how do you find... I know you're speaking about, ministering to young women that have gone through or maybe experiencing what you already have gone through, but how as an artist, and maybe you're not feeling that yet, but how as an artist are you finding yourself?
I love this question. I actually My godmother is a biblical counselor. She started a blog and has asked me to join on and start writing blogs for her for young mothers. One of the things that I am struck by is beauty. And we are as a people, I think, because we were made to look at beauty because God is beautiful. And my artistry has come just in teaching my children about beauty and using my artistry in that way, or hosting women inside of my home and making them a beautiful tea, or just creating beauty wherever I am. That ministers to people sometimes more than a wise word, or just words.
There's a song, I love Ben Rector.
Oh, yes.
And he has this really teeny short song, and it's just called Make Something Beautiful. And he says, please let me make something beautiful.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's in us. We are made with that desire and that need, because our God is the true artist. And so I'm finding ways to be beautiful, to create beauty right now. I can't do it with my body, which was my first, way that I have expressed beauty in the past. But even then, by taking care of myself, right now I'm getting rid of all toxins.
Yeah.
That's been my passion, and that's a way to beautify your home by creating more of a natural environment. So there's just so many ways. I'm realizing it's endless.
Yeah.
It's broad.
Yeah.
What I was doing with ballet was awesome, but it was very close-knit.
Sure. Very constraining.
Very constraining.
Yeah.
You don't have one way to show your beauty.
Right.
Now I am free to show it in lots of ways. So that has been a really cool thing that God has been showing me.
Yeah.
Different ways, small ways, great ways. They're there. It's been amazing.
I just love that. And thank you. And as seeing you as a young mom, and now I have 3 teenagers.
Wow. Okay.
I just encourage you, and I encourage listeners that are in kind of the phase of life you're in, to keep exploring that, keep being open to that, because I got in the trap of, I wanted to be this amazing mom, bring creativity in. It was my mission, but I went too far and lost myself in that.
Sure.
So just my little bit of 2020 vision, just stay open to all of that with serving others and taking care of yourself too, which you are with your toxins. So good job.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
so
great.
to
Very
wrap
encouraging.
up, which I just love this conversation because I learned so much, because like I said, I'm such a fan of the ballet world from the audience perspective, and just knowing, this kids right together.
Yes.
And how you've really listened to God's call for your life, and you're acting on it. And it was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Chat with you and learn a little bit more. And
so encouraging.
So if people want to check out these gorgeous photos of you dancing that I've talked about, or anything you're doing now, where would they find you?
Pretty sure if they just Google my name, they will all come up. And even my blog should come up.
So Abby or Abigail?
It will be Abigail.
Okay.
Abigail Morwood.
Abigail Morwood. Yes. And we'll have it in the notes from our show today. But
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Abby is just so lovely, and I loved that interview. Her story actually reminds me, though, that whether you are following a calling that is coming from your own inner creativity, or whether it's coming from outside of you and coming from God, there's always a big transition that is part of that, whether you're a professional ballet dancer or just like a student graduating from high school or college. Transitions always come after listening to a call.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that is inevitable is change. And with change comes transition. And so, Clara, you and I worked on a guide, and fittingly, it's called The Graceful Guide to Transitions. And I would just like to say, if you're sensing that it's time for you to pivot, or as I would like to add, pirouette,
right,
then you can find the Guide to Graceful Transitions on my website, lzimmerman.com/transitions. If you were inspired by what you heard today, I would love for you to share it with a friend. And also, reviews are the #1 way that this podcast will be able to help more people step into their creative life purpose, and I would be honored to have yours. I'm so grateful you joined us for today's episode. I bet you're here because you know there's something more for your life. Whether you're moving into something creative or letting go in order to take that next creative step, I have something for you. My free guide to graceful transitions. You can find it at lzimmerman.com/transitions. And remember, if she made it, you can too.